Yeah, my experience is that different societies have very deep-rooted political cultures and traditions that extend far back in history, and for good and for bad, and that these cultures are real, they are persistent, they are different, they don't rank on an easy scale that this is the best and this is the worst like we want to do. And we need an approach. I very much like what you said and agree with it. There are different narratives that are held, and these different narratives have merit. And the solution in a world of different narratives is to speak with each other more than we do. We in the United States, and I say we, what I really mean is our political elites, do not speak with Chinese political elites except to point fingers or to yell at them or to do other things. We certainly don't even shake hands with Russian leaders or diplomats. But I've lived my whole career for 42 years of active duty listening to different narratives and seeing those perspectives from different sides and finding a lot of merit in the various positions and saying if you would sit down to speak with each other, we'd actually get somewhere. So let me be specific.
Okay.
China looks today not completely different from the Han Dynasty, a centralized administrative state. And with Confucian culture, with a tradition of excellence of the Mandarins. When I speak with Chinese senior officials, which I do often, they are the best informed professionals I know in the world. When I deal with them, they know their brief. They're sophisticated, well-trained, occasionally my students. And they believe in professional excellence of a decentralized administrative state. And that political culture is more than 2,000 years old. When you are looking at Russia, it looks a lot like Putin looks a lot like a Tsar. It's not an accident. That is a culture of authority and a culture of tradition. When I look at my own country, the United States, it is a semi-democratic, white-dominated, hierarchical, racist society that aims to preserve privilege by the elites. That's how it was formed in 1787. It was a slave-owning, genocidal country, killing Native Americans for a white culture. But amazingly, it still looks that way, although we're much more diverse now than we were.
Let me ask you this, Jeff, because this is...
I want to point out that these are deep cultural distinctions.
Right.
But we shouldn't just simplify because we say democracy and you know, these are, yes, it's important. What's important is actually the details. As I mentioned last night, Plato, democracy, that was the last thing on his mind. That was the enemy. The plus was a philosopher king, of course,
right,
in the Republic. And for Aristotle, it was much more subtle and complex of a system of governance that mixed governance by the one, by the few, and by the many, but on the good side of the ledger. And one more point I want to make about democracy, because we're in a democracy forum where we treat democracy as the good. The most violent country in the world in the 19th century, by far, was perhaps the most democratic or second most democratic, and that was Britain. You can be democratic at home and ruthlessly imperial abroad. The most violent country in the world since 1950 has been the United States. It's
Jeff,
been by far involved
Jeffrey,
in more,
stop
wait,
now.
in more
Let's,
wars.
Jeffrey, Jeffrey, I'm your moderator.
Good morning, everybody. I'm from Hong Kong, and I'm representing the Global Liberal Arts Alliance, and I'm going to ask a question about that. So, Mr. Sachs, yeah, you just raised that we should, the top political agenda is to alleviate inequality instead of arguing with each other which one is not democratic or democratic. But there are indeed authoritarian regimes which are they really motivated to tackle inequality while they build gulags in Xinjiang, jailing students and dissolving civil society in Hong Kong, and fading a history of large-scale killings in the Cultural Revolution? Well, I'm risking my only freedom of speech of saying that because I live in Hong Kong. But is that hypocritical or morally decent for the West to collaborate with them to alleviate inequalities as the first agenda to solve, while not condemning their
That's
the
good.
dangers?
It's clear. Thank you. Thank you. That's clear.
Yeah, thank you.
Jeff, do you want to respond to those first?
Yeah. My view is that we need a world that operates under two major charters. One is the United Nations Charter, and the second is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which is our moral charter. That's a multilateral charter. It is based on the idea of international cooperation that was envisioned after the horrors of World War II. It is, in my view, the basis for peace. In 1990, the basis for peace, when Gorbachev called for the end of the Warsaw Pact, was the end of NATO, actually, as well, and Europe living under a European security framework, and that's what the OSCE could provide. I've never been a fan of NATO since the end of the Soviet Union. NATO was a military alliance of the United States created to defend against a Soviet invasion of Western Europe. And the United States and Germany promised Gorbachev in 1990 explicitly that with the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact and with the reunification of Germany, NATO would not expand eastward. That promise was immediately reneged by Clinton and then by Bush, then it has continued under Obama and under Trump, up to and including NATO in the Black Sea, which, if anyone knows the history of the Black Sea, is absolutely viewed by Russia as the core of Russian security. And so it is a pure provocation, in my view. And it is a predictable outcome that we have this kind of explosion. So to my mind, prudence, that was the idea that I was emphasizing yesterday. Prudence, which is one of the four virtues, practical wisdom, it's often translated, or phronesis in Greek, means situational awareness, that you act in a way which is wise. And that's what we are lacking right now. And I know exactly why we're lacking it, because in 1992, the leaders in my country, many of my colleagues at Harvard and elsewhere, said, we are now the unchallenged colossus of the world. We can do what we want.
Jeffrey,
and just to say, wait, just let me, because he asked, I'm going to finish the answer, and then I will give the floor to you. Sorry. So, okay. Just to say, if you say who made most of the wars of recent years, first, NATO bombed Serbia in 1999. UN, no way. The invasion of Iraq under complete lies, not misunderstanding, but lies. the CIA operation to overthrow Assad in 2009.
I think you've answered the question,
the NATO mission to
for
overthrow
God's sake.
Gaddafi. And then we say, how can anyone launch a war? Well, 4 of the last 5 came from the United States side. And NATO enlargement did as well. We need some balance and prudence. That's my point.